Have you always wondered how the best Photoshop artists get that painterly cinematic finish to their work, or how they manage to get the depth and distance of their landscapes to look so realistic? In this react, I'll be breaking down the techniques ENCREATE used to create this Dragon Witch artwork in Photoshop, as well as the inside scoop on how to get these free figure stock images for you to use in your own project. What's happening, guys? I'm Dean Sammet, a pro book cover artist from the UK, and you're tuned into photomanipulation.com. Ready to learn from the pros? Let's crack on. Okay guys, we're rocking and rolling. So this piece here is by ENCREATE, one of our buddies, a friend of the channel, and he has his own YouTube channel. You're probably already familiar with him. His style very popular, and today he's working with an image from our Big Bad figure bundle. So we actually put together a bundle of 100 free figure stock images for people to follow along with our tutorials, and ENCREATE grabbed this kind of post-apocalyptic figure to create this piece with. If you want to grab those 100 free stocks, the link is down in the description below and the pinned comment, so grab them so you can follow along with our tutorials and other people's tutorials as well. So ENCREATE turned that figure stock into a smart object. If I zoom into the right there, you can see that little icon represents a smart object. What that basically means is that he can do the compositing, cut out, remove the background, and if there's ever an issue he wants to tweak something, he can dip into the smart object and tweak the values or update the image. So it's what we call non-destructive editing. Now then, this Gothic skyline that I'm assuming he's grabbing to put into the composite, he made a selection of those background tones using the channels panel, which is over there to the right next to the layer stack as a tab, and then use the image adjust levels commands to control the blacks and the whites, because if he wanted to select the whites, he would push the whites. If he wanted to select the blacks, he could push the blacks. And what that's allowed to do is allowed him to grab that really complex image in just a fraction of the time. So you have weirdos like me that would sit there and cut that image out with a pen tool, and it still wouldn't do a great job of dealing with those clouds or the soft edges. So that channel trick that he used to create a selection and do the background removal for that Gothic skyline, really fast. These things here, I don't actually know what this is. These look like some kind of guidelines, perspective. So the background itself has a bit of a jaunty angle. It's not perfectly straight on. This creates more visual interest and adds a bit of, what's the word for it, dynamism to this piece. And those guidelines, I'm assuming that he's using that to keep skyline level for all the different elements. So he's got multiple stocks there for building up and creating that Gothic fantasy city. So we've got perspective lines, and he's creating them using the good old pen tool. And as we move forward, what we'll be keeping a close eye on is for when he's doing, because ENCREATE is a master of these fancy highlights and rim lights, deep pink and blue, purple tones. You guys all know that style, trending very heavily on YouTube right now. But you can see all of the layer masks in place. So everything, he didn't permanently delete those backgrounds. He's used the layer mask, so at any time he can dip back in and change the visibility of the elements. Now that dragon stock is from Adobe stock. The PM team and me as well, we all use Adobe stock for about 80% of all the work we do. I know we own our own stock platform, but it doesn't give us all of the assets we need. So Adobe stock is a gigantic platform, and we use it all the time. There's a link for that in the description. What I'll do is I'll write down that dragon stock file name, and then if you do want that dragon stock, just go in the description and I'll put a link for it right there. Any elements that I see there, I'll put down so you guys can grab them yourself if you want to do a similar inspired artwork. So we've got the main focal point, which is the apocalypse girl. And then we have the secondary kind of focal point, which is the dragon, and then a smaller dragon in the background. And you can see how these visual elements stack up. It's not too crowded, it's not too centralized. ENCREATE is using angles to create visual interest. Now I'm interested to know what he'll do with these kind of cloudy fog elements at the bottom of the screen, whether he'll change the opacity or the layer blend mode to transition that in. I like to use photo stocks for the fog and smoke effects. We've actually got a really good overlay bundle that that has automatically done foreground, fog, smog and mist. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Apologies guys if I'm looking really shiny. It's like an oven in here. I've got the window closed, and as you guys know, this summer has been a hot one. So please don't be offended by my sweaty face. We've got some action going on here, and he's working in some hair. So let's get a zoom in. Okay, so manually adding some strands. We've got smoothing 23% if you look there on the brush. He doesn't have airbrush or pressure sensitivity or anything like that enabled. Yeah, that looked like a mixer brush. So you probably use the mixer brush to take the sharp edges off of the hair elements. And let's get that bit of transform. Now then, here's an interesting thing. This element, this kind of architectural element in the foreground is closer to the focal range of the camera. So the contrast will be higher and the image will be sharper because it's within a similar focal range to the main figure, which is in focus. The main dragon as well, and then the further back you go, the more fuzzy, hazy, less saturated the elements will be, and that is creating the illusion of depth. So not all of the elements within this composite are at the same sharpness and saturation. And when I say saturation, that means how strong the color tones are. So you can see that bit that he's moving into position there, just got standard saturation, and then I'd assume bring down the saturation and the contrast so it matches the other buildings that are further back. Just added a load of contrast to those background buildings using a curves adjustment layer. If you're a newbie watching this and you don't know what an adjustment layer is, it's basically an image edit that is on its own layer. So as I talked before about non-destructive editing, the image adjustment, you can tweak things, change things anytime you want to go back and change it. It's not a permanent change done to the pixels, because the more things you do to pixels, and when I say pixels, this could be a layer or a stock image, the quality degrades after each time. But if you're using an adjustment layer, it's non-destructive. It is not permanently changing the data of the pixels on a layer. You can go back, edit, amend, change anything you want at any time. So I see he favors curves. He's using curves a lot. And on that layer mask, you can see the majority of it is white. And white will show on the layer mask and black will hide. So that curves adjustment layer is covering the whole image, and then he's using a black brush to pull back the parts where he would like the light to be shining. That's actually quite a good trick. Gradient maps, these are great for color processing. Nice smooth kind of even color tones, works really well. So let's take a look. We've got some magic effects here. So the magic is being manually painted on. I can't see any settings in place for the opacity or the flow, but I could just see smoothing. So I don't know if that's a specialist brush he's got there or a bog standard. The blend mode is normal, so it's not set to screen or hard light or any of those fancy layer blend modes. And he's got his layers names there, so highlights and manually laying down, so flow. Now he's got the flow set to 70, and this is usually how digital artists in Photoshop control the power of the brush strokes. Because if you leave everything at 100%, you're just going to get these heavy-handed strokes, and sometimes you need a more delicate touch. So a lot of the artists on our own PM team sometimes uses the soft edge brush or whatever brush they're using, airbrush, at very low setting, like around 3 to 10%, sometimes 13%, sometimes 15%. So it's really handy to control the intensity of your brush using the flow setting. Now, before I was talking to the other guys on our team a lot, I was actually using the opacity, and it's not as good. Flow allows you to build up and layer a lot nicer than using the opacity control. So if you didn't know about that, really good tip. It really helped me out loads in my own work, especially with these kind of ethereal and magic lighting effects. That's interesting. Encreate's using curves to create these color cast layers, and then using the layer mask to bring those in. So instead of just using a red tone set to normal on a new layer and then changing the layer blend mode, ENCREATE'S using the curves adjustment to create these highlights, which is quite interesting because the curves by nature will make those color tones interact with the pixel data below in a different manner than just using a bog standard layer. I might look into that further and possibly do a tutorial about it on a later date, but it's cool seeing it in place here. This color lookup adjustment layer, Abby Esparza on our team uses this quite a lot, and it does give some very cinematic looking tones. Really nice adjustment layer, and what you can do with those as well, the color lookup adjustment layers, is build them up on top of each other. Really handy. I wonder why he called that particular layer subsurface. What does subsurface mean? If you know what that means, give me a shout in the comments below. Here you can see the layer mode, so he's getting a bit fancy now. He's got the layer mode set to lighten for applying these reflective glows on the wings, or it could be the transparency of the wings, because they're kind of organic batwing materials. When light passes through them, they're not fully dense or fully solid. It's like really thin leather. So I'm wondering if these lights on the dragon wings are reflected light from the scene, or he's creating the illusion of transparency with the leathery wings. Interesting, not too sure what he's going for. If you've got a theory, throw it in the comments below. Here's what I was talking about earlier. He's going for a more delicate touch with the highlights, and when you look at the brush settings at the top, now the flow itself is at 61%. So he doesn't want to go too hardcore heavy-handed with those highlights. He wants to be more delicate. And now what ENCREATE'S doing, so he's got the, if you look to the layer stack to the right, he's using curves for doing both the shadows and the highlights. And this is a common practice in kind of magazine photography retouching. Dodge and burning by another name, but I'm sure he's added a little bit of a twist to it. It's not exactly the same. Ambient lighting, that's set to soft light, and soft light is really nice for adding delicate hues to an overall scene. Overlay is very similar, but it could be a little bit too heavy-handed and strong. Hard light is a step above that, but soft light, if you can build it and taper it up and layer it on, especially if you're using a low flow setting for your brush, is really handy for building up tones incrementally and creating that ambient reflective light. This stuff really popular in the fantasy and sci-fi niches, and a lot of the times it really does take a delicate touch. You can't be too heavy-handed. Further to what I was saying earlier on, I believe what he's doing there is he's creating the illusion of transparency with the wings, because now he's worked it over a bit, I can really see that eclipse. There's an emitted light coming from that, and that's going through the semi-transparent wings, the leathery wings. Really clever stuff. I don't think I would have thought to have done that. It looks really good. And here we can see the build-up of that dense misty fog down there at the bottom of the scene, and now he's pulling out those highlights on the edge of the figure. More soft light for ambient reflected light. That looks like one of our overlays. Just add snow. Adding small particles like this can really enhance and improve an image. So is this how all these guys are getting that nice fine art grain? I've got to pull that back. There's one thing I've noticed when I've watched kind of Phase Runner's work and a few of the other guys that are really good at this fantasy style, is that they're not too sharp and photographic, and a lot of them seem to have like a fine art grain to them. So the reason why I've just pulled this back, because I want to see exactly how he did that grain. So there, his name's the layer grain. I believe he's filled it with 50% grey. Added like a noise, Gaussian blurred, and then I'll have to look into the PSD to see what layer mode he changed that to. But what that's done is it's taken away the sharp fake photographic edge and given it a bit more of that fine art tactile feel to it. So a little bit more, you could say, cinematic. Have you noticed when you're watching TV shot on really sharp 4K cameras, like a soap opera or something, and then you watch a film that's shot on IMAX film, there's a different quality to it. It looks more cinematic, it looks more pleasing. That's the reason why Mr. Beast doesn't shoot in 4K. He likes it to look a little bit more tactile. These sparks brought in, nice and handy. So these are the little flourishes that really add an extra element to a piece, the final details. But it's crazy to me how fast he pulled this all together. This would have taken me ages. Big shout to the main man ENCREATE for this one. His success on YouTube is well deserved. Links to his video and channel down below. The best tip I got from this is the magic lighting effects using a gradient map. Gonna try that one out with one of my own artworks very soon. What's the best technique you learned from this breakdown? Let me know in the comments below. If you got a kick out of this react, there's another one popping up right here where we break down the work of Mr. 23. Be sure to check it out. That's it for this one. See you next time. Thanks for watching.